Yeah, still a few of you. I mean, 7 years you're going to be studying, and our lives are going to be in your hands. Please tell me what's behind the door. I'm scared now. Well, I'm not really, but I mean, I can't expect you to know. If someone actually worked here, and do you know what's behind the door?
There obviously has to be something behind the door. So
really?
Know that
Air? Yeah. Could be a vacuum? Yeah.
But there is an area that exists within space-time. So at least we know.
You never know. That could be a wormhole to another dimension, my friend. Right? It could be Stargate right there. I mean, fair enough. That's fine. That's good. I mean, to be absolutely fair to you, you can rationalize some things, and you could probably take an educated guess, right? But you don't know, do you? Okay, you don't know for definite, all right? Okay, all I'm trying to illustrate is the limit of reason. The limit of reason. And that's quite shocking to think how severely limited reason is. We call this in Islam ilmul ghaib, the knowledge of the unseen. It is a demonstration of the knowledge of the unseen. There is something unseen, an unseen reality. Now, what if I was to tell you that, well, I know what's behind that door? And what if I was to tell you furthermore, by the way, your life depends upon you believing me within the next 25 minutes. Or in fact, you need to know what's behind that door within the next 25 minutes. Or else it's going to have very severe consequences. Now, if I was somehow able to persuade you that I know what's behind that door. So for example, I start explaining to you how, in fact, I am the person who regularly cleans this lecture theatre. And what if, on top of that, I was able to give you some evidence that I was the person who regularly cleaned this lecture theatre? In fact, what if I was able to take a key and actually insert, not that it has a key, but if I was able to take a key and insert it in the door and show you without opening it, look, I can actually wiggle around the key. You see, it works. I can't open it, but I can show you the key fits. I mean, presumably I could give you more and more evidence until you'd probably reach the stage where you'd agree that the most rational option for me is to indeed believe that my claim is true. Okay? And this is exactly what we would, or I suppose this is an analogy or a metaphor for the revelation that God, the Creator, has given us. We believe as Muslims that throughout time God has chosen certain human beings. And these human beings have been chosen to be a vehicle through which and by which people could know more about God and answer these fundamental questions. Why is there suffering on the earth? What is the purpose of life? What is the reason for my existence? Is there something that is going to happen to me after I die? And rather like my analogy, of course, the consequences of believing or not believing are extremely severe. They are indeed very serious. And we believe that God has given these messengers and these prophets signs, indications through which and by which a rational thinking person could come to feel certain that the claim of those prophets is a true claim. Amongst the things that prophets have been given are books. Those books contain words, guidance, revelation from God, from the Creator, to explain to us these things. And that is, of course, the claim that the Muslim makes, that Muhammad, may God's peace and blessings be upon him, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, is the last messenger, and the Quran is the final revelation from the Creator. It has come with some signs, some evidences, some things through which a rational person could examine, could look, could study, and reach certainty that this claim is true. When I say certainty, of course, I don't mean an absolute certainty. You can't reach absolute certainty merely by rationally examining these things. I don't believe, anyway, reason can lead generally to absolute certainty. Okay? And so really, the rest of my lecture today is really to try and explain to you why God tells us, or what God tells us, why the world is the way it is. Why did God make the world in this way? Why is there suffering? Why are there difficulties? Why is there hardship? What is the explanation that the Quran gives and that the Prophet Muhammad gave for all of these things? First of all, I want to put everything into perspective. The first perspective I would like to put everything into is that I'm sure most of us would agree that it is really an exaggeration to describe life as suffering. In fact, I was a Buddhist for a couple of years, and one of the reasons I really felt unconvinced by Buddhism is that the premise of Buddha's philosophy was that life is suffering. And that's a faulty premise. And if your premise is faulty, then what follows on from that is almost definitely going to be faulty. Life is not suffering. In fact, I'm sure most of us would agree that the joy and the happiness that we experience in life is usually much more than the suffering that we experience. And it usually happens, quite fortuitously, that suffering, you know, we have the saying, when it rains it pours. Suffering tends to come in bunches, and that's actually good. Psychologically, it's good. And good things tend to happen to us most of the time. I don't say this is the case with every single person, but to simply portray life as suffering is ridiculous. In fact, most of the time human beings experience an extremely positive relationship with their life. In fact, the Quran is full of warnings to human beings not to get carried away with the life of this world, not to be deceived by its pleasures and its joys. Indeed, most human beings are so immersed in the pleasures of life, when someone comes to tell them, hey, you need to know what's behind the door, they say, man, I'm just too busy having a good time to know or even care what's behind the door. In fact, statistically, by the way, most people don't care. They just don't care. In this country. I don't mean on the whole planet. In this country. We know it because we've done a survey. Most people don't, about 70% of people in this country, we did a statistically sound survey. 70% of these people in this country don't want to know about any religion. Not Islam, not Christianity, any religion. They just don't want to know. They don't care. Because I presume they're just pretty busy enjoying their life. It's just fine the way it is. Why would I even need to think about anything else? So that's the first perspective I'd like to put. You know, this portraying life as if it's full of suffering and there's no joy, there's no happiness, right? As if life is full of neglect and starvation and disease, whereas in fact, in reality, Most people don't really experience that at all. The second perspective I would like to paint is, well, let's be real. Like they have that phrase, let's get real about ourselves as human beings. And what I find is a lot of people who talk about this and complain about this, whether it's on the BBC or whoever, it is such a skewed and almost arrogant perspective. I mean, from the angle from which they feel justified to question God. So let's put the human being in perspective. Human beings are small, little creatures. You just need to fly up in an aeroplane and look down and you can't even see us. We're small, little creatures. And if you are able to travel outside of this Earth's atmosphere, soon our Earth would recede and become an almost insignificant dot. Indeed, if you kept on going a bit further, our whole solar system, including our sun, actually ends up being a small dot on the outer arm of the spiral, of the outer arm of our galaxy, which is called the Milky Way. The Milky Way is estimated to be 10,000 light years across. That means if you traveled non-stop for 10,000 years at the speed of light, that is how long it would take you to cross our galaxy. And our galaxy is one of millions of galaxies in the known universe. That's what we know. Now I'll open the door a little bit. The Prophet Muhammad, may God's peace and blessings be upon him, he said in an authentic narration, he said, the universe compared to the kursi, which you could translate as the chair or the pedestal, or it is the greatest, next greatest created thing after the universe. I don't think we think of it in a literal sense, but the kursi. The universe compared to the kursi is like, imagine this, a ring thrown in the desert. A ring thrown in the desert. That's our universe compared to the kursi. And the kursi, compared to the arsh, which means the throne, is also like a ring thrown in the desert. What is incredible is that the one who is above the arsh should care about us at all. That is incredible. I mean, if we were to anthropomorphize God, you know, you walk along the floor, you don't care what insect you crush, what ant you crush, right? What animal you destroy. You drive in your car, you don't really care how many bugs splatter on your windscreen. I mean, what are we? What are we? We're just dots on a